On behalf of the Asian the Pacific Sites of Conscience Network, welcome back to our third day of transformative documentation, new approaches to community-driven documentation initiatives, the third and final global workshop in our 2020 virtual series, Countering Erasure, Addressing Absent Spaces, Amplifying Voices, and the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. At this point, you already know me, but my name is Silvia Fernandez, and I am the Global Network Programs Director at the International Coalition of Sites of Conscience. Most of you are already Zoom veterans, but just in case we have someone joining us for today for the first time, like my friend Maya, let me remind about a few technical aspects. The meeting is being translated into Arabic, English, French, and Spanish. To activate the translation feature in Zoom, please click the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen. To help our translators, please try to speak a bit slower than usual. Also, please remember to keep yourself muted when not speaking. If your connection is bad, try to turn off your video. If you have technical problems during the meeting, Camila is with us today. So as we've been doing during the week, please make sure to reach out to her through the private chat tech support. Cami, again, thank you for being here with us this morning. As you all know, Cami is in New York, so it's 3 a.m. in the morning. In the chat box, Elena and Camila they have posted the meeting's agenda in Spanish, Arabic, English, and French, as well as the links, correct, Elena, the links to the 3 resource Padlets. As I've been explaining, these are virtual flip charts that we are using to archive thoughts and resources throughout the meeting. So feel free to access them to check out any reports or any presentations that they may have been shared, or for yourself to upload information that you would like to share with other participants. And lastly, please, please, please fill out the evaluation polls and the surveys that we will share with you right before the coffee break. And at the end of the day, these are really important for us. I can't stress it enough. We haven't received as many surveys as we would like from the previous day. So I please ask you to take a few minutes to fill this out at the end of the day and during the coffee break. All right, Cami, can we go into the next slide, please? So very, very briefly, as most of you know, the coalition is the only global network of historic sites, museums, and memory initiatives that connect past struggles to today's movements for human rights and social justice. The coalition was founded in 1999, and now we have over 300 members in 65 countries. We support our members in a variety of ways, including grants, networking, joint programs, and training workshops like this one today. For more information or about the coalition, including how to join, please visit our website at sitesofconscience.org. Cami, next, please. As explained in previous day, transformative documentation, the title and the topic of this week's meetings, is one of several actions that the Asian the Pacific Sites of Conscience Network is undertaking to counter what Nigerian author Chimamanda Adichie called the single stories. Yesterday, Radhika Hettiarachchi, founder and curator of the Her Stories Archive, a member of the coalition, presented the concept and the development plans of the regional exhibit Shared Journeys, another regional attempt to create alternative, more inclusive and egalitarian national and regional historical narratives through the collection of oral stories. Through the presentation of 3 case studies from Germany, Syria, and Colombia, and the training that followed, yesterday we also got a glimpse of the role documentation plays in providing those silenced communities, often the most affected by colonialism, war, and conflict, opportunities for their needs to be represented in the public narratives that shape the future of their countries and regions, and therefore access truth, justice, and reconciliation. Today, we will continue to build on what we learned yesterday. In 30 minutes or so, we will hear from our coalition members, from 4 coalition members from Chile, Afghanistan, Lebanon, and India about the crucial role community-led documentation plays in healing, reparation, and truth-seeking. At 4 p.m. Dhaka time, 11 a.m. CET, Milena Nikhil, from the Public International Law and Policy Group, will lead the second training session on community-led documentation in transitional justice. This session, as you know, it's for members of the coalition only. And today's session will include an interactive session to develop concept for documentation projects in your communities. So please make sure to join us. And now I am pleased to share another initiative aimed to bring to the fore the voices of victims and minority groups while fostering women leadership, the Stand Up Project. The Stand Up Project, it's an initiative of Women of Conscience and aims to build bridges between women around the globe through capacity building and mentoring. The first program will be launched in a couple of weeks and will connect emerging women leaders from Nepal with professional women leaders from the US. I will let my colleague Prabal Thapa, who is coordinating the Women of Conscience Stand-Up program in Nepal, to present the project and introduce one of the participants who is with us here today, Ms. Pampa Basel. Prabal is campaign coordinator at NEFAD, the National Network of Families and Disappeared in Nepal, a member of the coalition, where he coordinates the community-based memorialization initiative. Prabal is a graduate student of Applied Conflict Transformation Studies, ACTS, at the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies in Cambodia. He's an active member of the Asia Sites of Conscience Network and coordinator of the Women of Conscience Stand-Up program in Nepal. Prabal, thank you as always, and I will hand it over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Silvia. Good afternoon, good morning, and good morning, everyone. So, without a delay, as a part of Women of Conscience initiative led by the coalitions, we are connecting the emerging women leaders, basically the locally elected government officials of Nepal, with the professional women leaders of around the world. If we discuss about the context of the background of the Nepal after the constitutional development here in Nepal, it has ensured very good initiatives to gender mainstreamings and through the gender quotas. If we discuss about the local communities and the local government, there is a provision that there must be a 50% of women participations in each of the categories. Through this, there is no any constitutional restrictions for the women to take the lead of the local governments in Nepal. And if we talk about the grassroots, there are it's a good achievement for the Nepal and Nepalese people in the social justice movement. There has been a very good participations of women in the leadership. As the Constitution of Nepal has provision that there must be a woman in the chair or the deputy chair of the local municipalities. As a result of this, there is a huge participation of women, but still there is a challenges to take them to the lead. And more than 95% of the local governments has a woman as the deputy mayors, and others have the like men in the mayor positions. So but if we take the examples of the local governments or the communities having women as a mayor or the chair of the local governments, they are doing a good job, let's say like good job in the sector of the governance, in the sector of the social justices and other aspects. And today we have one of the deputy mayor from the local government of Nepal who will be presenting and explaining her experiences while reaching to that positions and working as a deputy mayor. Her name is Miss Pampa Basel, and Pampa Basel is a deputy mayor of the Palungtar municipality in Western Nepal. Miss Basel has dedicated her life for the socio-political reforms in her locality and have been actively engaged in the political advocacy of the local constituency in rural Nepal for 2 decades. Moreover, she is among the very few of the deputy mayors representing a highly marginalized Dalit community in Nepal. Now she has been elected as a deputy mayor of the local government of Nepal, who holds a strong political and administrative role in the local government. She is the participant of Women of Conscience stand-up program, through which she aims to share her experiences and learn from the professional women around the globe. Her area of interest includes ethnic rights and social inclusion. I will be I will be giving the floor to the Pompa Bashel, and she will be presenting in a Nepali language, and I will be translating her. So over to you, Pompa. Start गर्नुस्.
Yes. Thank you so much, Prabal Thapa. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. म सबैसँग माफी माग्न चाहन्छु. मैले नेपाली भाषामा नै मेरो कुराहरू राख्न चाहन्छु. प्रबल भाइ,
हजुर दिदी.
के गरौँ, सरासर राख्ने अनि हजुरले लास्टमा गर्ने हो हैन?
हजुर.
Thank you so much, Silvia. यहाँले जुन आफ्नो चाहिँ विषयवस्तु प्रस्तुत गर्नुभयो त्यसको लागि धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद छ. हामी 6 जना नेपालबाट चाहिँ डिपुटी मेयरहरु हामी 7 जना. त्यसको लागि मैले सबै साथीहरुलाई पनि, हाम्रो सहभागी साथीहरु सबैलाई म हार्दिक नमस्कार व्यक्त गर्न चाहन्छु. विशेष गरेर हामी नेपालमा चाहिँ जुन महिला लिडर चाहिँ स्थानीय सत्ता सरकारको एउटा नेतृत्व गर्दैखेरिको अवस्थामा मैले यहाँहरुको यो कार्यक्रममा जुन जसरी सहभागी बन्नको लागि हामी अगाडि बढिरहेका छौं. त्यस सन्दर्भमा चाहिँ सबैभन्दा पहिला हामीले विभिन्न 4 वटा महिला लिडरहरुसँग हामी नेपालका 6 जना महिला लिडरहरुले, स्थानीय सरकारको प्रतिनिधित्व गर्ने महिला लिडरहरुले जुन हामीले अन्तर्क्रिया र यसमा आफ्नो देशको हजुर
म भन्छु ल. Thank you so much for providing this opportunity for us, that we are representing the leaders of the local governments of Nepal, and we are very much pleased to be in the platform. All 6 of us are in this meeting, and I'm very glad to be here.
नेपालमा हामी महिला स्थानीय सरकारको नेतृत्व गर्दै गर्दा यो अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय हिसाबले विभिन्न राष्ट्रमा चाहिँ विभिन्न सरकारी तथा गैर सरकारी संस्थाहरु, विभिन्न संस्थाहरुमा चाहिँ नेतृत्व गरेर आउने जो महिला लिडरहरु हुनुहुन्छ उहाँहरुसँग हामीले एक आपसमा आफ्नो चाहिँ कामको अनुभवको साथमा कानुनी कुराहरुको साटासाट गर्ने एउटा अवसर मिलेकोमा चाहिँ कोअर्डिनेटर गर्नु भएकोमा प्रबल थापालाई म धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु. साथै सहभागी सम्पूर्णलाई म धन्यवाद पनि आभार पनि व्यक्त गर्न चाहन्छु.
We are expecting these platforms will provide us an opportunity to learn about the global experiences of women movements and about the legal reforms that has been going all around the world.
विश्वलाई नै हेर्ने हो भने, अब विश्वको जनसंख्यालाई हेर्ने हो भने सबैभन्दा धेरै जनसंख्या महिलाहरूको छ. अब चाहिँ नेपालको सन्दर्भमा हेर्ने नि टोटल जनसंख्याको 51% महिलाहरूको जनसंख्या रहँदै पनि नेपालमा महिलाहरूको आन्दोलनको विभिन्न खालका इतिहासहरू छन्. जुन 1974 मा योगमायाले त्यतिखेर सामाजिक रूपबाट महिलाहरूमाथि गरिने जुन खालको विभेद थियो, त्यो विभेदको विरुद्धमा सामाजिक परिवर्तनको लागि सुरुवात भएको आन्दोलन आज हामीले स्वतन्त्रताको लागि, समानताको लागि र त्यस राणा शासनको जुन कुप्रथा थियो त्यो कुप्रथाको अन्त्य हुँदै गर्नको लागि 2007 सालको प्रजातान्त्रिक चाहिँ प्रजातन्त्रको स्थापना र त्यसमा प्रजातन्त्रको स्थापना भएका विभिन्न खालका चाहिँ कुप्रथाहरू थिए. ती कुप्रथाहरूको अन्त्यको लागि जुन महिलाहरूले गरेको एउटा महिलाको क्रान्ति, त्यसपछि 2017 सालको बहुदलीय व्यवस्था हैन, त्यस सँगसँगै 46 सालको जनआन्दोलन र हामीले 2052 सालको चाहिँ जनयुद्ध, 2063 सालको चाहिँ जनआन्दोलन हुँदै आज हामीले नेपालमा 64, 70 र आज चाहिँ 74 को चाहिँ निर्वाचनसम्म हेर्दाखेरिको अवस्थामा चाहिँ नेपालको इतिहासमा महिलाहरूको विभिन्न ठाउँहरूमा चाहिँ अहोरात्र खटेर पनि त्यो राजनीतिक हिसाबले जस्तो, आर्थिक हिसाबले जस्तो, नैतिक हिसाबले जुनसुकै क्षेत्रबाट पनि महिलाहरूको सहभागिता अमूल्य हुने छ र रहँदै पनि महिलाहरूको चाहिँ एउटा त्यसकै आन्दोलनकै फलस्वरूप नै आज नेपाल एउटा संघीयतामा गइरहेको अवस्थामा 3वटा तहको सरकारमा चाहिँ 40% स्थानीय तहमा र 33% प्रदेश र चाहिँ संघीय सरकारमा महिलाहरूको सहभागिता रहेको कुरा चाहिँ मैले यहाँलाई जानकारी गराउन चाहन्छु।
Not only in Nepal, if we see the global prospects, there is a like larger proportion of women globally in terms of populations. If we discuss about Nepal, there is 51% of the population is female population, but the contributions and the contributions made by the larger portion of the female has not been acknowledged in the past. If we discuss about the Nepalese feminist movement, it was started in early 90s, and there is a very crucial role of the woman for each and every political and social movement from 90s to the recent political
1947.
It was started from 1947, and there has been a tremendous role of the woman for all these kinds of social and political movements, but that has not been acknowledged in a proper way in terms of political reforms and social reforms.
नेपालमा महिलाहरूको इतिहासलाई जोड्दै जाँदाखेरिको अवस्थामा आज हामी नेपालमा चाहिँ लगभग 4200 महिलाहरू चाहिँ निर्वाचित भएका छौँ। संघीय सरकारमा 7 जना महिलाहरू प्रत्यक्ष रूपबाट निर्वाचित हुनुभएको छ भने अन्य चाहिँ महिलाहरूलाई समानुपातिकबाट जुन 165 जनामा 7 जना मात्रै प्रत्यक्ष रूपबाट निर्वाचित हुनुभएको छ। स्थानीय तहकै कुरा गर्ने हो भने चाहिँ प्रमुख र उपप्रमुखमा 1 जना महिला अनिवार्य रहनुपर्ने व्यवस्थामा प्रत्येक अब चाहिँ स्थानीय तहहरूमा महिलाहरू उपप्रमुख उपाध्यक्षको पदमा चाहिँ निर्वाचित हुनुभएको छ र त्यसमा चाहिँ 36,339 जना चाहिँ महिलाहरू स्थानीय तहमा मात्रै निर्वाचित हुनुभएको छ, जसमा अब चाहिँ हामीले यति धेरै महिलाहरू नेतृत्वमा चाहिँ निर्वाचित हुँदै गर्दाखेरिको अवस्थामा पनि हामीलाई थुप्रै खालका चुनौतीहरू छन्। त्यसको बावजुद हामीले अझै पनि चाहिँ समाजमा आर्थिक रूपबाट महिलाहरूले समस्या भोग्नु परेको छ, राजनीतिक रूपबाट, सामाजिक रूपबाट, सांस्कृतिक रूपबाट चाहिँ विभिन्न तहहरूमा चाहिँ महिलाहरूलाई चुनौतीहरू चाहिँ रहिरहेको छन् र हामीले त्यही चुनौतीहरूलाई सामना गरेर आज स्थानीय तहमा उपप्रमुख उपाध्यक्षको हैसियतले यहाँहरूसँग चाहिँ यहाँ नेपालमा भएका महिलाहरूको आन्दोलन, यहाँका चाहिँ जातीय आन्दोलन, यहाँका क्षेत्रीय आन्दोलन र विभिन्न संस्थाहरूसँग सरकारसँगको साझेदारी कार्यक्रमहरूको विषयमा चाहिँ हामीले यहाँहरूसँग एक आपसमा अनुभवहरू साटासाट गरेर सेयरिङ गरेर नेपालको कानुन सम्मत हिसाबले हामीले नेपालको कानुनमा महिलाहरूलाई नेतृत्वमा कसरी अगाडि बढाउन सक्छौँ भन्ने कुराहरू चाहिँ आज यहाँको छलफलबाट चाहिँ हामीले अगाडि बढाउन सक्छौँ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ मैले राख्न चाहन्छु।
हजुर, there are 4,200 directly elected women leaders in the different layers of the governments. Like we have 3 layers of government: the federal government, provincial government, and the local governments. Out of 165 seats in the provincial government, only there are 7 women who are directly elected. And if we take a total number, there are 36,339 women leaders who have been directly elected in the different layers of government, different layer of government officials. So today I'm here with you by overcoming a very like deep-rooted socio-cultural and political like discrimination that has been prevailing in Nepalese feudalistic Nepalese society. And with this program and with these initiatives, I'm very hopeful that we will learn about the legal reforms that can mainstream the women and the women leaders.
परवल
हजुर जी,
एउटा मात्रै कुरा राखेर सक्छ है।
हजुर,
यति कुराहरू गर्दै गर्दाखेरिको अवस्थामा हामीले नेपालमा विश्वलाई हेर्दाखेरि हामीले पनि अरू राष्ट्रहरूमा चाहिँ महिलाहरूले एकदमै फ्रिडम पाइरहेको हामीले बाहिर मात्रै देख्छौँ, तर नेपालको संविधान 2072ले नेपालमा चाहिँ यति धेरै महिलाहरूलाई सङ्घीय सरकारमा र अब चाहिँ प्रदेश सरकारमा 33% चाहिँ जनसङ्ख्याको आधारमा 33% सहभागिता छ, जसमा चाहिँ जातीय हिसाबले दलित जनजाति होइन, अब क्षेत्रीय हिसाबले अब चाहिँ एकदम विकट क्षेत्र, अब चाहिँ सीमान्तकृत, अब चाहिँ अल्पसङ्ख्यकहरू सबै क्षेत्रबाट महिलाहरूलाई चाहिँ सहभागिता गराउने हिसाबले चाहिँ संविधानले प्रदत्त गरे अनुसारकै हामी आज यहाँ निर्वाचित भएर आएका छौँ। निर्वाचित भएर आउँदै गर्दाखेरिको अवस्थामा चाहिँ अझै पनि हामीलाई नेतृत्व लेभलमा रहेर काम गर्नका लागि थुप्रै चुनौतीहरू रहेका छन्, जुन अब चाहिँ अगाडि ब्याटलमा अगाडि जाने क्रममा चाहिँ हामी कामका सिलसिलामा हरेक ठाउँहरूमा काम गर्ने ठाउँहरूमा चाहिँ महिलाहरू अगाडि बढाइएको छ भने निर्णायक तहमा अझै पनि महिलाहरूलाई चाहिँ पछाडि नै राखिएको अब चाहिँ अवस्था छ। व्यवहारिक कानुन एकातिर छ र चाहिँ व्यवहार अर्कोतिर रहेको स्थिति छ। त्यस कारणले पनि त्योसँग जुधेर जानको निम्ति चाहिँ हामीले अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय रूपबाट महिलाहरूलाई कसरी सहभागी बनाइएको छ र त्यो ठाउँमा चाहिँ महिलाहरूको स्थिति कस्तो छ, नेतृत्व लेभलमा महिलाहरूको सहभागिता कस्तो छ, कुन प्रक्रियाद्वारा चाहिँ महिलाहरूको सहभागिता रहेको छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ मैले यो कार्यक्रम मार्फत जान्न पनि चाहन्छु। र यहाँहरूको तर्फबाट जुन विषयवस्तु यहाँ राख्ने, अब चाहिँ यहाँले चाहिँ हामी नेपालमा रहेका महिला लिडरहरूसँग जुन कामको अनुभवहरूमा चाहिँ जुन यहाँले राख्ने एउटा जिज्ञासाहरू छन्, त्यो जिज्ञासामा यहाँहरूले राख्नुभएको जिज्ञासालाई मेटाउने प्रतिबद्धता सहित मेरो विषयवस्तु यही अन्त्य गर्न चाहन्छु। हस्त, धन्यवाद, थ्याङ्क यू सो मच।
In the international scenario, we can see lots of reforms in the feminist movement, and we can see the freedoms exercised by the women leaders outside Nepal or in the international scenario. And the Constitution of Nepal has provision of very good initiatives, a very good structures that we have a rights to fight for the political seats as a government officials, and the Constitution has ensured the rights of the indigenous community, marginalized people, marginalized communities, and the other underprivileged groups of people in Nepal. But even after reaching to the leadership of the local government, we are not been able to capitalize our legal duties, our legal rights and responsibilities in a full-fledged. We are still in the shade of the male leaderships, and it is because of the lack of the capacities, and also also a kind of restrictions, what to say, like hidden restrictions that is prevailing in the leaderships and the Nepalese societies, is obstructing us to fully exercise our rights. Through this program, we are expecting to learn from the global leaders that how we can maximize our roles as the lead of the local government, so that it will contribute to the feminist movement, the women's movement in Nepal, and also we can that allow us to contribute for our society. So our main expectations from this Women of Conscience program is to maximize our roles as a government officials by learning from the global scenarios and the global leaders. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pampa, and thank you, Prabal. Pampa, is very, very nice to meet you. I also want to say hello and thank the rest of the participants that of the Standard Project Nepal that are here with us. I'm going to open the floor for questions. I just wanted to also mention that I didn't do it before, that this is a pilot project, so it's the first time that we are launching it. And then from here, we will learn from this initial phase, and then we will be launching it to other future collaborations among different countries. So if you are interested in participating or helping connect emerging women leaders from your country, please reach out to me, or please reach out to Sarah Murphy at the Secretariat office in New York. Any questions?
केही छ अरूको साथीहरूको यसो सोध न।
हजुर Pampa is happy to answer the questions if you have any of them.
Any questions, anyone?
कसैको साथीहरूको कसैको चाहिँ क्वेसन केही छ कि सहभागीहरूको अरू उसबाट सहभागी हुनु भएको छ हाम्रो साथीहरूको पनि केही कुरा राख्ने हो भनेदेखि भन्देऊ न।
Prabal?
Yeah, if any of the participants has the questions, she is happy to answer the questions. And हाम्रो कोही हुनुहुन्छ हाम्रो तर्फबाट पम्फाजी?
Well, Silvia, I have a question.
Yeah, Mofido?
Yeah, I very much like the submission made by Pampa and would like to know about how she came at this stage or how she contested into the local government election and about her background because it's always very difficult for women to take the leadership, and in Nepal we know that it is a very difficult phase of history that they have passed through with the civil war, with the conflict, and how she went through the conflict and how she has taken her role in the society. Prabal, can you explain?
Yeah. हजुर दिदी, जस्तै अब नेपाल जस्तो देशमा महिलाहरूको नेतृत्व स्थानीय सरकारमा देख्दा राम्रो लाग्यो, खुसी लाग्यो मलाई। तपाईको यहाँसम्मको यात्रा कस्तो रह्यो? अब नेपाल त द्वन्द्वबाट ग्रसित देश अनि यहाँसम्म आउनुभयो, तपाईको अनुभव कस्तो रह्यो, कसरी चुनौतीहरूलाई जित्नु भयो भन्ने हुन्छ?
थ्यांक यू सो मच मोफिजुल हैन
मोफिडोल।
राइट, यु आर, या
मोफिडोल है। धन्यवाद क्वेसनको लागि। म विशेष गरेर मेरै व्यक्तिगत रूपबाट भन्दाखेरि प्रत्यक्ष रूपबाट जनयुद्धमा सहभागी बनेको एउटा क्याडर हो। स्वाभाविक रूपबाट नेपालको इतिहासलाई हेर्दाखेरि महिलाहरूले विभिन्न खालका चाहिँ चुनौतीहरू त सामना गरेर आउनु भएको छ। त्यो सामाजिक रूपबाट, त्यो मानसिक रूपबाट, त्यो भौतिक रूपबाट हरेक हिसाबले चाहिँ उहाँहरूले भोग्नु भएको त्यो चुनौतीहरूसँग त सबै त हामीले तुलना गर्न सकिँदैन। तर अहिले मेरै सन्दर्भमा यहाँहरूले हामी अब चाहिँ यहाँ आउँदै गर्दाखेरिको अवस्थामा चाहिँ विशेष गरेर हामी यहाँसम्म आइपुग्दाखेरि आन्दोलनका चाहिँ चरणहरू, जुन चरणहरूले हामीलाई एक आपसमा एउटा खुड्किलालाई अगाडि बढाउनको निम्ति चाहिँ साथ दिएको छ। विशेष गरेर जनयुद्धकै सन्दर्भमा कुरा गर्दाखेरि हामी एउटा सिद्धान्तमा आधारित रहेर हामी एकजना महिला मात्रै होइन, हजारौं महिलाहरू त्यहाँ सहभागी बनेर हाम्रो एउटा चाहिँ नीति, एउटा चाहिँ योजना, एउटा कार्यक्रममा सहभागी बन्दै त्यो नीति योजना र कार्यक्रमले नै हामीलाई यहाँसम्म लिएर आइपुर्याएको छ, जसको फलस्वरूप नेपालमा थुप्रै महिला दिदीबहिनीहरूले आफ्नो जीवन अब चाहिँ बलिदान पनि गर्नुभएको छ हैन। कयौं दिदीबहिनीहरू घाइते अवस्थामा हुनुहुन्छ, अपाङ्ग भएर बसिराख्नु भएको अवस्था पनि छ र कयौं दिदीबहिनीहरू आज हामी त्यसै नै सामाजिक रूपबाट अगाडि चाहिँ नेतृत्व गरेर आउने अब चाहिँ एउटा अवसर हामीले मिलेका छौं र यसलाई एउटा अवसरको रूपबाट पनि लिएको छु मैले मात्रै नभएन हाम्रो सहभागी अब चाहिँ यहाँ सहभागी हुनुभएको सबै साथीहरू त्यही अब इतिहासबाट त्यही ब्याकग्राउन्डबाट यहाँ आइपुग्नु भएको छ। त्यसकारणले चाहिँ उहाँहरूलाई जुन अब चाहिँ हामीले अगाडि बढाउने कुरामा जुन हाम्रो चाहिँ सहभागिताहरू छन् भोलिका दिनहरूमा, त्यो इतिहासले दिएका चाहिँ जुन चाहिँ लाइनहरूलाई चाहिँ हामीले सही ढङ्गबाट अगाडि बढाउनु पर्छ भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ मैले दिएको छु। सायद अब चाहिँ अन्तर्राष्ट्रिय रूपबाट हेर्दाखेरिको अवस्थामा जति महिलाहरूलाई खुला देखिन्छ त्यो कुरामा चाहिँ महिलाहरूलाई लाउन, खाना, बस्नदेखि लिएर हिँड्नदेखि लिएर हरेक कुराहरूमा चाहिँ हामीले जुन चाहिँ समस्याहरू भोग्न परेछ, चुनौतीहरू भोग्न परेको छ, त्यसलाई चाहिँ हामीले कानुन सम्मत हिसाबले चाहिँ अगाडि बढाएर जानलाई सहज गरेर जाने भन्ने कुरा चाहिँ यहाँ राख्न चाहन्छौँ।
As you told Mofidol, it was not easy to reach up to these positions. I myself worked as a cadre of the people's revolutions conducted in Nepal for a decade, and passing through that movement, many of our friends have lost their lives. Many of them are still injured, are in the critical situations, we had to struggle with the physical, social, cultural, and psychological like violence to overcome these challenges and to reach to these positions. To reach this position, and many of us who are in the lead of the local governments are from the same backgrounds, who have participated in the people's revolutions and also the people's movement movement in Nepal in 2006. And these movements were the passing channels to get to these positions. And yeah.
Thank you, Pushpa. I understand the struggle that you have went through, and wish you success in your new struggle. This is also the new struggle, not with arms in hand, but in a peaceful way to build a new life. Wish you success.
Thank you.
So we have 2 more questions. James, you raised your hand. So I'm going to take these 2 more questions and then we need to move on to the next. So one is James and the other one is Ankala. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name well, Ankara Chaudhary. But James, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Silvia. And actually, I also thank the two presenters, the Pulpa and also Prabal. I don't know whether I also pronounced your name very well. I'm really also enjoying your presentation. It's very good presentation. And I like also to present your presentation that you touch some of the areas about how then the women in Nepal also, wake up and also work very hard and then to compete with others men, in the politics, so that then the country could have also very good governance. So one of my questions that I need to know is, during the campaign, during the struggle, then to compete with others opponent in the political competition, what were the challenges that your group also faced then to prevent the women to participate fully and effectively in the politics? And some challenges that you note which may prevent you as a group of the women who are interesting to participate in the government, or in a politics. Thank you. Back to you.
तपाईँ एउटा कम्युनिस्ट आन्दोलनबाट आउनुभएको रहेछ हैन, त्यो सुनेर मलाई खुसी लाग्यो। एउटा कम्युनिस्ट आन्दोलनबाट आउने महिलाले अरू पार्टीबाट आउनुभएका साथीहरूसँग पनि प्रतिस्पर्धाहरू भयो होला, अरू राजनीतिक दलहरूका साथीहरूसँग, त्यो प्रतिस्पर्धा कस्तो रह्यो भन्नुहुन्छ?
थ्याङ्क यू सो मच जेम्स। अरू साथीहरूसँगको निर्वाचनमा हाम्रो प्रतिस्पर्धा राम्रै रह्यो। मेरो चाहिँ नेपालको सन्दर्भमा नेपाली काङ्ग्रेसको प्रतिद्वन्दीको उपप्रमुखसँग चाहिँ 406 मतले अन्तर रहेको थियो र हाम्रो यहाँको सन्दर्भमा एकदम राम्रो प्रतिस्पर्धा नै रहेको थियो।
चुनौतीहरू कस्तो भोग्नुभयो?
चुनौतीहरूको विषयमा चाहिँ अब चुनौतीहरू त स्वाभाविकै रहन्छ। अब पार्टीभित्र अब नेपालको सन्दर्भमा त अब चुनाव नै अब अलिकति भद्दा खालकै छ हैन। पैसा अब आर्थिकको कुरा रह्यो, त्यस पछाडि सामाजिक रूपबाट अब चाहिँ सामाजिक कुरामा पनि अब जातीयताको कुरा थियो हैन, अब वर्गीयताको चाहिँ गरिबको कुराहरू पनि थियो र त्यसमा अब चाहिँ विशेष गरेर अब उमेरको कुरा मेरै सन्दर्भमा हेर्दाखेरि उमेर पनि कम उमेरको भएको हिसाबले केही भिन्नता केही चुनौतीहरू चाहिँ ती चुनौतीहरूलाई सामना गरेर अगाडि बढेको।
Yes. Of course, there were some of the challenges while reaching to these positions. The first challenge was the economic challenge. Like the elections in Nepal are very expensive, and if you have to struggle with the economic challenges, being a representative of the marginalized, underprivileged community, I had to struggle with the social challenges to overcome that. Also, there is a peculiar system in India and Nepal called the caste systems. We call Jatiyata in Nepali. And I had to overcome that also. And also the age. Like there were many of the political leaders, from other political parties, who were elder than me and who had more experiences in their political field. I had to struggle with them as well. So there were many of the challenges, and I had a very small, how to say, vote difference with another lady from another political party, Nepalese Congress.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for answer. Back to
okay,
to
let's take one more question from Ankala. Is that correct? Is that how?
Anchala.
Anchala.
Okay.
Thank you, Prabal.
Anchala ji, question राख्नुहोस्.
नमस्कार, मेरो क्वेसन यस्तो छ, जस्तो तपाईको अरु देशमा मेयर र उपमेयरको कार्यलाई कसरी विभाजन गरिएको छ, अनि कार्यकाल सकिएपछि राजनीतिक र सामाजिक उहाँहरूको स्थान के हुन्छ भन्ने कुरा हो, त्यो जान्न खोजेको परलाई।
She is asking a question with anyone in the chat room, and she wants to know about the structures of the local government, what is the position of the mayor and the deputy mayor in the local governments, and what are their roles after they retire from that position.
So just a comment. That's a big question right now, and we are already running over time. So I suggest, and people are, Sokun also has some more questions. So I'm going to make a suggestion. Tomorrow we have time at the end of the day for the Women of Conscience community. Okay. Since this is a community, as I mentioned yesterday, or the first day, sorry, that we are building, why don't we allocate time during that session to address some of these questions and to keep building the Women of Conscience? Okay, because I think this is sparking a lot of like new ideas and debate, and unfortunately we do not have the time now. So I propose to move this debate to tomorrow during the Women of Conscience community. I will send an email about it. Is that okay?
Okay.
Pampa, once again, thank you very much for being here today. I am Prabal, you will be translating, right? Okay, because I want her to to know this, that I am enormously grateful for you being part of this project, and I will be seeing you throughout the course of the year. Thank you.
पम्फा दिदी र हजुर सबैजना यहाँ पार्टिसिपेट गर्नुभएकोमा सबैजनालाई धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद। भोलि हामी वुमेन अफ कन्साइन्सको अर्कै छुट्टै एउटा प्रोग्राम राखेका छौँ। अञ्चला दिदीले सोध्नु भएको प्रश्नको जवाब भोलि त्यो कार्यक्रमबाट आउनेछ, त्यो प्रश्नमा उता फरवर्ड गरिदिन्छु। भोलि पनि यो कार्यक्रममा सहभागी हुन धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु भन्नुहुन्छ।
Thank you so much, Silvia, and everyone. हामीलाई यो कार्यक्रममा सहभागी बन्न दिएर अब चाहिँ यहाँलाई पनि म धेरै धेरै धन्यवाद दिन चाहन्छु। हाम्रो चाहिँ अब यहाँबाट सहभागी हुनुभएको साथीहरू पनि हामीसँग पार्टिसिपेन्ट हुने साथीहरू 4 जना हैन त परल भाइ?
हजुर,
4 जना हुनुहुन्छ हैन। उहाँहरुसँग पनि हाम्रो साथीहरूको प्रत्यक्ष कुराकानी हुन्छ। त्यसमा पनि हामीले धेरै कुराहरू सिक्ने एउटा अपेक्षा पनि राखेका छौं। सबैजनालाई धन्यवाद सहभागीको लागि।
Thank you so much, Silvia, and the entire team of Coalitions for providing us this opportunity and to reflect our experiences in this platform. We are very much hopeful to see you all in future. Thank you so much, and she is extending her regards on the behalf of all the team, all the members of the WOC Conscience Stand-Up program in Nepal.
Perfect, great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So let's move on to our next panel. It's a global panel on documenting for memorialization. Unfortunately, our moderator hasn't been able to join us today, so I will be stepping in that role. So let me make introductions. So the panel for today brings together 4 different case studies from members from the coalition. We will hear from a member in Chile, Afghanistan, Lebanon, and India about their efforts in using documentation for memorialization purposes, healing, truth-telling, and reconciliation. The first panelist that we have with us is Inés López from Chile. She's originally, well, she works at the Memorial PAINE Chile, but she's originally from Venezuela. She's a sociologist and holds a master in cultural management and policies. She holds more than 10 years of experience working in social project management and part of the project team of the Memorial PAINE in Chile for the past 3 years. Inés, thank you very much for being with us here today. I know it's really early over there in Santiago, so welcome. I will be introducing the rest of the panelists as their presentation go. So Inés, I hand it over to you, please.
Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes y buenas noches. No sé si en algunos sitios es de noche. A todas y todos. Bueno, muchas gracias a Silvia por la presentación. Como ella misma comentó, yo voy a hablar un poco de la experiencia que hemos tenido en Memorial PAINE sobre lo que podríamos llamar el proceso de documentar la memoria. Bueno, inicialmente, si pueden pasar a la siguiente, por favor. Bueno, les quería comentar primero de qué se trata un poco el memorial. Memorial PAINE es un espacio que se construye en recuerdo a los 70 detenidos, desaparecidos y ejecutados de la comuna, que en su mayoría, todos fueron hombres y en su mayoría fueron campesinos. Y este proceso de desaparición, detención, desaparición y ejecución responde a su participación en un proceso de transformación social que se dio en el país a cargo de políticas de Estado, que fue la reforma agraria, que buscaba que estos campesinos que estaban organizados pudieran tener acceso a la tierra, pudieran ser dueños de esa tierra y poder gestionarla para que ese beneficio fuera para todas y todos en las zonas rurales del país principalmente. Obviamente, muchas de las personas que inicialmente eran dueños de estas tierras, estos privados que veían afectados sus intereses, fueron los que tuvieron un rol importante en la dictadura cívico-militar en Chile para estos procesos de detenciones ilegales y también desapariciones. Las oportunidades que se estaban dando a estos campesinos era de gran relevancia y por lo tanto el proceso de detención y de ejecución y la violencia política en general que se vivió fue muy intensa. Luego, prácticamente el día siguiente de sus detenciones y desapariciones, las familias se comenzaron a organizar para su búsqueda, pero con la llegada de la democracia, eso se tradujo en organización que permitió que ellos pudieran exigir tener un espacio donde recordar. Y eso se convierte de algún modo en una política de reparación para las familias, una política de reparación simbólica para las familias, de poder tener un espacio. Se abre un concurso público que estuvo a cargo del Ministerio de Obras Públicas y de otros actores del Estado, que permitió crear, inicialmente la idea era poder crear un parque donde se pudiera recordar a todas y estas personas. El concurso lo gana una artista chilena junto con un grupo de arquitectos, Iglesias y Prat, y la idea del espacio era poder representar las presencias y las ausencias en el sitio, sin perder de vista las características geográficas que tenía la comuna. No olvidemos que es una comuna que, si bien se encuentra a solo 40 kilómetros de la capital del país, que es Santiago de Chile, es una comuna fuertemente rural y que para la época tenía aún más presencia de esa identidad rural. Además de esto, una de las cosas que también es muy relevante en el espacio es la participación activa que tuvieron las familias, no solo logrando conseguirlo, sino en su creación. Porque el espacio se compone de aproximadamente 90 rollizos de madera que tienen diferentes alturas y al verlos en conjunto dan el horizonte geográfico de PAINE, pero también en esa representación de las ausencias, en el lugar donde deberían estar 70 rollizos, se extraen simbólicamente 70 de ellos y se colocan en su lugar 70 mosaicos que representan a cada uno de estos hombres que se recuerdan y que fueron construidos en su mayoría por familiares, con lo cual cada uno de estos mosaicos tienen particularidades que no solo se enfocan en ese acto violento de su detención ilegal y de ejecución, sino que da cuenta de la identidad de la comuna en líneas generales, pero que también en particular nos habla de qué era relevante para cada uno de ellos, qué le gustaba, cuáles eran sus sueños, cuáles eran sus anhelos, y todo ese disfrute, esa cotidianidad que cada una de nosotras y nosotros destacamos y relevamos y que podríamos hacer igual con uno de nuestros familiares. Posterior a esto, con los años se comienza a ver la necesidad de poder tener un modelo de gestión que permita sostener este espacio, no solo para tenerlo como un homenaje, como un recordatorio en sí mismo, sino que se pueda gestionar ese trabajo de memoria. Y es por eso que se busca fortalecer este trabajo de memoria, pero también identificando cuáles deberían ser como las líneas relevantes que debería tener este espacio. Siguiente lámina. Entonces, una de las cosas que se busca en el momento de delinear qué es lo que se quiere para este espacio, una de las cosas que va a estar presente al momento de hacerlo es querer posicionar esas experiencias históricas en zonas rurales por esas particularidades que tienen estos espacios, considerar también las memorias de lo colectivo y las luchas por lograrlo, porque este recordar y este proceso de memoria no se agota con lo que inicia en la dictadura cívico-militar en 1973, con este proceso represivo, sino que también debe dar cuenta de toda la movilización y de las luchas que vivieron y que protagonizaron las personas que nosotros recordamos en este espacio. Además, destacar la construcción social y comunitaria, no solo del espacio, sino también como una impronta de gestión, porque se da un proceso de diálogo, un proceso participativo que fue muy intenso e importante en el momento de la construcción del espacio a cargo de las familias al momento de construir los mosaicos, pero también después se busca que también estos procesos de diálogo y participación estén presentes en toda la gestión. Además, se habla de la represión de los campesinos de PAINE y de las luchas de sus familias por visibilizar lo ocurrido, porque justamente con este contexto que obviamente para todas y todos era muy adverso, en el caso particular de las zonas rurales también estaban involucrados otros elementos, por ejemplo, que muchos de ellos, de los actores represores, eran vecinos y vecinas de la zona, que los conocían, que en algunos casos muchas de las familias al verse también tan vulneradas posterior a la desaparición, tuvieron que volver a trabajar en estos sitios donde ellos sabían que estas personas tuvieron algo que ver con este proceso de represión. Entonces rompió muchos de los lazos comunitarios que el memorial también como espacio y en su gestión busca fortalecer. A partir de todas estas consideraciones se definen áreas de trabajo, una de las cuales es la que se lleva el protagonismo en este proceso, que es el área de educación y visitas guiadas, porque se considera que ese trabajar por el nunca más se hace a través de la educación y de apostar al trabajo en derechos humanos con las generaciones más jóvenes. Y por lo tanto, esta área de educación y visitas guiadas es la que se presenta como un área más fortalecida y que se consolida rápidamente. Además de esta área, la acompañan el área de comunicaciones y visibilidad y el área de proyectos y gestión. En este sueño de construir este memorial como proyecto, una de las líneas que siempre estuvo presente y que se visualizó era un área de archivo e investigación, porque se consideraba desde el inicio que iba a permitir no solo nutrir a las otras áreas, sino convertirse en sí misma no en un repositorio de documentos, que era obviamente lo que no se quería, sino que se pudiera convertir en un espacio donde se pudieran incorporar otros actores para seguir relevando y visibilizando todo lo que vivió en PAINE y todas las aristas que se podían considerar en este trabajo por la memoria, es decir, verlo desde una perspectiva de género, verlo desde la ruralidad, verlo desde las identidades que estaban presentes, etc. Sin embargo, a pesar de tener el memorial un financiamiento del Estado que se renueva todos los años, esta área en particular se vio desplazada, por ponerlo en esos términos, de esa gestión, de incorporarla a ese trabajo que realizamos nosotros año a año. Por lo tanto, las formas en las que hemos podido hacerlo ha sido a través de fondos concursables y eso no nos ha permitido tener la constancia que sería necesario para esta área y para nosotros. Siguiente. Uno de los proyectos que llevamos a cabo en el año 2019 para esto y que fue lo que nos permitió dimensionar la relevancia que esto tenía en términos operativos para nosotros, fue este proyecto de Sembrando Memoria, que nos permitió construir un archivo digital que podría verse como un repositorio digital, donde allí se pueden encontrar parte de lo que nosotros consideramos que es relevante que tenga acceso toda la comunidad. Siguiente. Nosotros allí lo que buscábamos era implementar esto en un contexto digital, considerando que el espacio no tiene las condiciones físicas y técnicas que puedan ajustarse, o los recursos para ajustar un espacio físico en el memorial, que nos permita tener un archivo físico. Y también para nosotros es importante que este archivo digital, si bien está a disposición de todas las personas, los documentos que forman parte de este archivo digital están en posesión de las familias de estas personas. Por lo tanto, nosotros lo que hacemos es habilitar archivos personales para que la gente tenga acceso a ellos. Y obviamente se nutre de ese proceso que se vive no solo de 1973 a 1990, sino que también da cuenta un poco de ese proceso que se vivió posterior al 90, de las luchas que vivieron las familias. Siguiente. Entre los productos que nosotros podemos comentar, que conseguimos y que se encuentran a disposición en esta plataforma, son 17 testimonios de familiares de estos 70 detenidos desaparecidos y ejecutados de PAINE, que dan cuenta de quiénes eran justamente ellos, pero también de ese proceso de lucha que ellos vivieron y protagonizaron. 120 documentos históricos registrados, que son los que les comento, que forman parte de estos archivos personales de los familiares. Un área habilitada donde eso se puede acceder, que es dentro de nuestra página web hay un espacio donde están alojados, y además, justamente por esta idea de que no sea solo un repositorio y que no sea solo una acumulación de documentos, se hizo enlaces con organizaciones de derechos humanos de la misma comuna para que pudieran conocer cómo se trabaja y que posteriormente podamos tener una instancia donde todas y todos podamos nutrir este archivo. Que no se vea solo como un archivo del memorial, sino que se vea como una forma de dar cuenta de PAINE, de la identidad de PAINE, de lo que se vivió allí. Además, se generaron jornadas en escuelas municipales vinculadas a temas de derechos humanos y de memoria en la comunidad, y de cómo nosotros podemos generar archivos de memoria y derechos humanos en nuestras comunas y cómo darle una perspectiva desde el presente también. Y relacionado con esto, también nos dimos cuenta que una de las formas en las que nosotros podemos desarrollar este proceso de documentar la memoria ha sido a través de publicaciones que nos permitan sistematizar un poco estas experiencias que nosotros vivimos desde una perspectiva pedagógica. Porque justamente eso, si quieres pasamos a la siguiente, porque justamente eso es lo que nos permite no solo sistematizar y darnos cuenta nosotros que tenemos la capacidad de poder hacer y dimensionar un poco todo el trabajo que nosotros estamos haciendo, sino fortalecer otras iniciativas. Entonces hemos desarrollado hasta la fecha 3 cuadernillos pedagógicos. El primero, que es Memorial PAINE, Pedagogía, Arte y Memoria, que daban cuenta un poco del modelo de trabajo educativo que nosotros desarrollamos. El segundo, que lo vimos también como iniciar una colección de cuadernillos, que es el de Archivo de Memoria y Derechos Humanos, que está relacionado con el proyecto que les mencionaba anteriormente, y que se convierte en una propuesta educativa que se puede replicar no solo con estudiantes, sino también en organizaciones sociales, por la importancia que tiene poder documentar los procesos y las luchas que cada una y cada uno de nosotros desarrollamos. Y este año justamente desarrollamos un segundo cuadernillo pedagógico que también relaciona las características del espacio y la identidad del espacio, que está muy fuertemente vinculado con el arte y los mosaicos principalmente, dando cuenta un poco de estos talleres de mosaicos que nosotros desarrollamos y cómo se da cuenta de ese vínculo pasado-presente a través de las temáticas que los participantes de estos talleres de mosaico, que son principalmente jóvenes en edad escolar, dan cuenta de las luchas y de los temas que son relevantes para la época. Entonces allí vemos una sistematización de todas las temáticas que se trabajan, de cuáles son las temáticas que desde la perspectiva de estas generaciones más jóvenes son relevantes al momento, o cuáles son las luchas que están dando o qué luchas están protagonizando ellos. También para mostrar que si bien hubo luchas en el pasado a cargo de estos jóvenes y de estos hombres en un contexto rural, en estos momentos también hay unas luchas que se están dando, que están protagonizando otras personas y que es importante que nosotros podamos destacar. Nosotros allí también nos hemos dado cuenta que este proceso de sistematizar también permite apoyar indirectamente a otras organizaciones que puedan desarrollar otras experiencias y que nos podamos apoyar justamente porque cuando nosotros entendemos que estas vivencias que se dieron en PAINE no solo se circunscriben territorialmente a él, sino que también están presentes en otros contextos, considerando el pasado, pero que también en el presente están surgiendo y se están dando permanentemente. Es importante que nosotros como organizaciones de derechos humanos tengamos la posibilidad de poder apoyar y que además, considerando este contexto de pandemia que nos mantiene un poco distanciados físicamente, podamos también ofrecer alternativas y ofrecer apoyos para otras organizaciones para seguir fortaleciendo el trabajo que nosotros realizamos. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Inés. Thank you, Inés. Before moving on to the next panelist, I want to make sure everyone is doing okay with the interpretation because I got a few messages. Is everyone doing okay with interpretation? Just, you can use the chat box to just say a quick yes or no, because I want to, okay, perfect. Okay, good. FYI, because I know I mentioned this at the beginning. Okay, there is at the bottom, at the right bottom of your screens, within the Zoom, obviously, page, there is an interpretation icon. So you need to activate that if you need interpretation, okay? Inés, thank you so much for your presentation. There's already been some questions. Han habido unas preguntas que al final de cuando se hayan acabado cada una de las presentaciones, volveremos a ella. Okay, yeah. Gracias. I will now like to introduce our next panelist. His name is Ghulam Saki, and he's part of the Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization. He is the research director at the Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization, known by AHRDO. Where he focuses on investigating violations of international humanitarian law, international criminal justice, justice and accountability frameworks, and victims and civil society inclusion in peace processes in the context of armed conflict. Ghulam has previously worked with International Crisis Group, the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan, and United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees on peace building, conflict prevention and resolution, human rights protection, and reintegration issues. Ghulam holds master's degree in post-war recovery studies from University of York, a master in laws in public international law from the University of Nottingham, and an undergraduate degree in politics and IR from the London School of Economics. Ghulam, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today. We very much look forward to your presentation. Thank you. You have 15 minutes, as you know. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. To set the context, Afghanistan, unfortunately, is still a country in conflict, and it has been in conflict since 1978. And this conflict is pretty much destructive. To give some figures on the fatalities, for instance, since 2009, there have been more than 100,000 civilians killed or injured, and more than 750,000 people, including civilians and military personnel from both sides, from the government as well as from the insurgent group side, have been killed or injured. And prior to 2001, we had more than 2 million people, close to 2 million people, who have been either killed or injured in the context of conflict which started in 1978 with the Soviet invasion of the country. And AHRDO is one of the first organizations that has started working on memorialization in Afghanistan. And it is an extremely challenging and difficult context because there is a conflict ongoing, and there are many factors that constrain the work we do. For instance, we have got, in terms of contextual constraints, the first factor is the peace imperative, where the government and other political elites mostly perceive that working on memorialization or human rights or victims group have the potential to interfere with the peace process. So they basically view it as an impediment to making peace in the country. And the other contextual factor which impacts our operation there is the ongoing conflict, which working with the victims and on memorialization project creates questions for them that this could be something against us, and this might create problems for us. So that's another concerning factors. In addition to that, we have counter narrative building, where we have a significant number of political and military elites who were involved in the conflict in the past, but they have a significant community following. And we see that they have a lot of resources, and they have power, and they have following building their narrative. And their narrative is mostly a narrative of the military leaders, people who think they were involved in just war, and the narrative coming out of the war victims questions the legitimacy and the credibility of their narratives. So these are like the difficult circumstantial factors that have been impacting our work in the context of Afghanistan. Yet we have been doing quite successfully. Our so far we have worked with more than 250 victims and have mobilized them and encouraged them to participate in a memorialization process. So working with memorialization process in the context of Afghanistan is very difficult because victim groups and victim individuals are extremely vulnerable and they are mostly illiterate. It's very difficult to encourage them to come up and open up and have the confidence to participate in memorial activities. So therefore, we have developed a very basic processes in order to help them to engage with the memorial activities. The memorialization process for us basically involves three key stages. The first stage is confidence building and narrativization, and the second stage is empowerment, and the third stage is the aesthetics of the oppressed. So to explain the first stage, in the first stage we basically start with very basic things with them. We usually start with playing games or theaters with them. For instance, in the first sessions when the survivors of the victims are brought together. So the first questions we ask from them in order to encourage to open up and engage and build trust and network with the others is, for instance, the question is, what is your name and how your name has been chosen and what memories you have got from your name. And then it leads to the second stage where we encourage them to share their memories. They usually, we put them in a group of 2, and then they discuss about their past, about their memories, about their stories. And then the third stage, we often ask them to basically make a drawing about each other, and then in that drawing make represent 2 positive comments and 1 negative comments about each other in order to create more empathy between the 2 groups. And then after that, we ask them to write about their memories, about their past, about what they have experienced their life. If they are literate, they might write and then read out their statements in a group. Or if they are illiterate, they often verbally share their memories with a group of 10, 15, or 20 people. So after this confidence is built up, then the other process that we use is memory of flag, where we ask them to draw a flag and see what they have experienced under this flag. This flag often refers to a period of conflict, and then that's where they open up a bit more, and then they write about their experiences of losses, of sufferings under a specific period of conflict. After that is done, they move on to the next important stage, where they draw the instrument. They think that instrument has caused them loss or sufferings. And then they are also asked to reverse that instrument. For instance, if their family member has died because of someone has shot them, they often draw a bullet or an AK-47, and then they also reverse it. For instance, they put a flower on the bullet or on that AK-47 in order to say that they wish this instrument had been acted this way. And then after that, we usually historicize their storytelling process, where we are trying to prepare them for telling their narratives, helping them in order to distinguish between what is telling a narrative of the past and what is the difference between telling a simple ordinary story, where we try to encourage them to remember the place, the event, details, and logical sequences of the experience they have been through. And after that process, we usually conduct interview with them and record their full narrative and their full stories. And after that, they engage in a game that's called Journey of Life. In Journey of Life, they usually draw all important events in their life, whether positive or negative, but mostly the turning points in their lives are drawn there, which are the negative events and the negative incidents that they have experienced in their life. And after they draw those turning points and definitive events that have impacted their life dramatically, and then they put all those drawing, and then next to their drawing, they put all the memorial items of their loved ones. Memorial items include all their personal belongings, like clothes, like photographs, books, whatsoever that somehow reflect their memories and remembrance. So after that is done, we move on to the second phase, or the second activity of the memorialization process, which is empowerment. In this empowerment, we often use community-based theater or theater of operas, where we are trying to help them identify their problems, move beyond that small circles of survivors of victims group, and look at what problems they have in their communities, and problematize the constraints they face in their surroundings, and then find solutions to those problems, and also to have the confidence to engage with the different actors, government and non-government actors, and try to find a mechanism to engage with those people who somehow can have direct impact on their life. And the third stage of the work is the construction of memory boxes, or otherwise called aesthetics of the oppressed, where we provide the victims, survivors of the victims, with training on building a small wooden box, draw them according to their own artistic tastes, and paint them the way they like it, and then they put all the personal memorials of their family members who have been killed, and hand it over to AHRDO as the organization in charge of the memorialization process. So after those memory boxes are completed, there will be a memory box exhibition where members of their communities, members of civil society, media, human rights group, they come to that exhibition, and they engage with the members of those family members of those victims, empathize with them, and encourage with them to stay engaged with the process. So this is like a descriptive a description of the processes of the memorialization project that we do in Afghanistan. And the outcome of this process are often three issues. First, we collect memorial materials. Second, we collect the narratives of the victims. And third, obviously, we have the family members and survivors of the victims themselves. And with the memorial materials, so the memorial materials which are collected inside memory boxes, they are put in institutions which we have specifically created for those memories, where they could be stored, preserved, and exhibited for public access. The organization we have created is called Afghanistan Center for Memory and Dialogue, where we have permanent exhibitions. That basically means that it is open to public all the time. So the public members, whether they are school children, university students, government officials, civil society, human rights organizations, they can always come there, visit the memory center, and use the resources that are available, and engage basically with the history of violence, with the legacy of war, as well as with the members of the victim community. And at the center, we also provide training on memorialization, training on significance of memory and peace building, and also we encourage public memorialization, engagement with the memorialization process through holding seminars, workshops, public conferences, inviting experts to give talks on what memory means, and how can memory be used as an instrument in order to eradicate violence and in public consciousness. And the other institutions we have created is victim-centered peacebuilding networks. The survivors of the victims with whom we work with after this memorialization process is completed, where they hand over their memory boxes to us. So we do not basically abandon them, we remain engaged with them. And we have organized them into victim-centered peacebuilding networks, where at the moment they engage on regular basis with technical support provided by AHRDO, with the peace actors, people who are involved in peace negotiation in Afghanistan, and they are trying to share their stories with them. They talk about their demands, and they call for justice and accountability to be considered in the process of peace building. Thank you very much. Here I'm going to stop.
Thank you very much, Gulam. Thank you very much for that presentation and for such a, and congratulations on such a comprehensive and impressive project. There is already a bunch of questions, but like I said, I will compile them and we will ask at the end. So I would now like to introduce Sabine, our next panelist. Sabine Saliba is the Executive Director at ACT for the Disappeared in Lebanon. She has been working on human rights for over 13 years, both in Lebanon and internationally, working for a children's rights organization at the International Labour Organization in Geneva, and as a consultant for various institutions, including Parliamentarians for Global Action and a Small Arms Survey. She holds a law degree and a master's in international law and has extensive experience in international humanitarian law and human rights law. Sabine, it's wonderful to have you with us again. Very much look forward to your presentation. Just a reminder, you have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you a lot for having me. I'm very happy, and listening also is very interesting to us. So before I explain, I give two examples of documentation for memorialization work we did in Lebanon. I want to explain the context we work in and to explain why we do the activities we do. So in Lebanon today, there are still several thousand people who are missing and forcibly disappeared. The greater majority of them went missing during the Lebanese Civil War that lasted from 1975 till 1990 at the hands of different armed groups, including Lebanese militias and foreign troops. Most of the missing and disappeared were civilians, and many of them were kidnapped from their homes, from the streets, or at checkpoints controlled by those armed groups or foreign troops. ACT for the Disappeared is a Lebanese human rights organization that was founded in 2010 to contribute to the clarification of the fate and whereabouts of the missing and forcibly disappeared of the Lebanese Civil War and help foster a sustainable reconciliation process. So after the end of the Civil War, the parties to the conflict signed agreements and agreed on an amnesty law that we refer to as a state-sponsored amnesia. And these agreements really damaged the possibility for future reconciliation and healing, because there was no transitional justice processes that were initiated, no reparation, and very little recognition for the victims. So in 2015, we, as ACT, launched an oral history project to collect the stories of the missing and people's war memories. We conducted more than 300 interviews, and we also developed a project to support and accompany the families of the missing through art therapy and psychosocial support. So if you can move on to the next slide, actually the one after, please. Thank you. So the first project I want to present is called, it's a digital online memorial called Fushat Amal. Fushat Amal in English means space for hope. So it's an online memorial that dedicates a space for the stories of the missing, told through the words of their families. So it goes beyond the facts of the disappearances and tells personal stories about who those persons were before they were kidnapped. So it's, we wanted through Fushat Amal to reclaim the identities of the missing persons and reaffirm their right to know their fates and whereabouts. We wanted also to pay tribute to the missing and to their families and to generate a better understanding of the conflict through documentation and storytelling. So we created this online memorial as an answer to the lack of justice and the death of hope that a lot of families, the hope for truth that families had. And we wanted also to pressure authorities to create a list of the disappeared that still doesn't exist today. And in the next slide, we can see a bit how the website looks like. You can see the different pictures of the missing and click on each one to see the dedicated spaces the platform gives. So the post-war national amnesia came for the families as an added layer of pain and suffering. So they found themselves really deprived of any means of sharing their cause with the wider communities. So we wanted through Fushat Amal to reverse this by providing a bridge that hopefully seeks to connect families who can now share their personal experiences with other families, but also to citizens from different communities. And people who go on the platform can learn and honor the missing through the voices of the family members. And in order to assist the older generation who are not familiar with online platforms, we trained young volunteers to conduct interviews with the relatives of the missing persons. And this helped not only in collecting the information for Fushat Amal, but also in creating a space for exchange between the families and the younger generation. In the next slide, you can see one example of one of the dedicated spaces for each person, and the stories that were told by their families. So this initiative consists of collecting information about the missing persons and creating this dedicated space for each of them, displaying whenever available biographical information, photos, information about their lives before they were kidnapped, and information about the disappearance. Because over time, their names can and have in a way become mere numbers, we wanted to reclaim their rightful place as members of our society. So other than being a public virtual repository of information on the missing, we wanted Fushat Amal to provide the families of the missing with the opportunity to express their personal stories, personal experiences. So we visited them in their homes and we listened to their stories. And also on the platform, anyone can register and submit information, but obviously we developed protocols to vet the information and make sure that when it's not submitted by the families, we have the consent of the families to post the information. So in the next slide, you will see, next slide, please. So as we launched Fushat Amal, yes, before, this is a short video of one of the stories that were told through the platform. I don't know if we can play it.
Cami the volume for the audio.
حياتي بحب كوني أم. كنت حب ظهر ولادي على الحقل، شوفهم عم يلعبوا، اقعد بالشمسات وحس الهوا عم يلعب بشعري. هول أحلى لحظات حياتي. بحب كوني أم، بس كمان بحب سافر، مهرب لطيف من واقع الحرب. اسمي كريمان، أنا ممرضة وبطريقة أخلص عالم انخطفت. شي بيضحك إيه؟ قالوا إنه آخر مرة شافوني فيها كانت بهالحي، يمكن هون حد هالمدرسة، بس ضروري تخلص قصتي هون.
Thank you. So there are many stories told through the voices of the families, and this is one example where we created the video for that. So when we launched Fushat Amal, we also launched an outreach campaign with it. This, and in the next slide, you can see an example of cubes we installed in the streets of Beirut. So in the next slide, please, it shows how people can gather around them, read the stories and see pictures. So it's individual stories of how their lives were before they were kidnapped and how they were kidnapped, with pictures whenever available. So we also, and you can see in the next slide, for a year and a half, we published weekly stories of persons who have disappeared. Next slide, please. In 3 different newspapers in Lebanon. So one was in English, one was in Arabic, and in the next slide, you can see a French version. So these went on for 18 months. On a weekly basis, a story would be published in these 3 newspapers. And this was part of an outreach campaign to tell the stories of the missing. Next slide, please. I'll explain now another example of memorialization work we have done, and it's an online exhibition we launched about 2 weeks ago that shows the work we did through our Empty Chairs Waiting Families project. So about 4 years ago, we started a project to support the families of the missing, to facilitate their participation in the search for the missing. So we developed together with partners an accompaniment project with a psychosocial approach to support and also empower the families in their efforts to establish the fate of their loved ones. So the project includes home visits, information meetings, and psychosocial group sessions that lead to memorialization activities such as the Empty Chairs Waiting Family Project. And in this project, family members supported with art therapists and psychologists design and paint a chair in remembrance of the missing person. So the chairs were designed by the family members. They can be brothers, sisters, parents, siblings, or even grandchildren sometimes of the people who went missing in Lebanon during the war. So the project started in 2016, and these empty chairs symbolize the empty spaces that the people who went missing left behind. So each one of them is the creative work of the family. Most of them had never even had a paintbrush before. And they wanted to, through the designs and the paintings they did on the chair, to reflect the stories and the personalities of the missing loved one and all the memories they have of them. So they were built during group sessions that allowed the families to sit together and share their sufferings with others who have experienced a similar situation and transform it into this an art expression. So the collective work brought together families from different backgrounds. We wanted to insist on that, so different communities can come together and highlight their common cause. And in a way empower and encourage them to continue the fight for those of them who may have lost hope. So the chairs help bring relief to the families, hopefully, when they see that each missing person is considered as more than just a number among the thousands of people who went missing. So it's an effort to recognize this unique struggle of the families and dedicate a space for them and for them to be able to dedicate a space in their homes for their loved ones. So here you see on the slide, this is the homepage of the online exhibition that we launched a couple of weeks ago. We wanted to launch, along with it, the plan was to launch an outreach campaign, a physical one on the streets in Lebanon, but with COVID and confinement issues, we launched the exhibition online, and we still continue today to the outreach campaign on social media. So on the homepage, you can read about the project, and this plain share usually turns, and you can click on it. Can you move to the next slide, please? And here you can go through, you can scroll through the more than 200 shares that were produced through the project, and all really done and by the families. Or you can click on individual ones. Can we move to the next slide, please? So as you see here, you can see it in a bigger format, and you can read the stories of the person who went missing, or an explanation through the words of the family member who painted the chair of why they painted it this way. So you can scroll through each one in this bigger format and read the individual stories and the date of their names and the date when they went missing. Next slide, please. So to conclude, I wanted to explain a little bit, why do we do these memorials? What do we feel we have achieved through them? So we want to collectively recognize and honor the lives of the missing, because like I said before, over time, their names can become mere numbers. So we wanted to reclaim their identity and restore their rightful place as members of our society. It's also a recognition for the families and a support in their grieving process, and hopefully help lead them through a healing process. So the stories, as you saw, through Fushat Amal or through the chairs, don't focus only on the facts of the disappearance, but tell the story of the person, how they lived before, what they liked before they were kidnapped. And in Lebanon as well, probably in many countries that go through civil wars, the different communities develop over time different narratives about the impact of the war. So online memorials help share experiences of those different communities that show that the impact in reality was similar on all communities. And it was also, and still is, an opportunity for the young generation to learn about Lebanon's wars and to have a better understanding of how the past shapes our present, and hopefully ensure guarantees of non-recurrence of violence. And one of the things that was achieved not only through these projects, but through decades of struggle of the families of the missing and advocacy and outreach campaigns, is that 2 years ago, the parliament in Lebanon passed a law for the missing and the disappeared to establish a national commission. And in June this year, the commission was established and would be in charge of clarifying what happened to the missing, locating and exhuming burial sites, and identifying remains and hopefully giving them back to their families, and also providing reparation to the families. So lastly, in the next slide, please, that's something we like to say to the families we work with, and through the stories we share, to the thousands of people of missing whose fate remains unknown, we will not let your stories end here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabine, for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like to move on and introduce our next and final panelist, Tashi Punsok. He's the director of the Tibet Museum in India. Tashi has worked for the Central Tibetan Administration, which is the Tibetan government in exile, for 20 years. Before joining the Tibet Museum as the director, Tashi worked at the Department of Education, Department of Home, and the Tibetan Center for Human Rights and Democracy. He's been the director of the Tibet Museum since 2012. Tashi was born in Thimphu, Bhutan, and was raised and educated in India. He holds a Master in History from Punjab University in 2001. Tashi, it's wonderful to have you here with us today. We were lucky to visit the Tibet Museum last year when we were hosting the 2019 regional meeting. So we are pleased to have you here and have you present on the memorialization work of the Tibet Museum. Thank you. You have 15 minutes, thanks. Tashi, you muted.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, so
good afternoon and good morning to all. So today I'm going to talk about how Tibet Museum collect memories of Tibetan art and culture in exile. So before that, I think it's very important to give a brief overview about Tibet, a very short one. So next slide. Okay. Next slide, yeah. So Tibet lies at the center of Asia with an area of 2.5 million square kilometers. Tibet is bordered with India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Myanmar in the south, China in the east, and Xinjiang to the northwest. Next slide. So the status of Tibet, Tibet was an independent country with a history of more than 2,000 years, with the first king dating back to 127 BC. Till its invasion by China in 1950, Tibet was an independent nation with all attribute of independent country, such as defined territory and population, a government possessing authority over its territory with its own flag, army, police, postal stamp, currency, and the capacity to enter into relations with other recognized state. Tibetan passport was also accepted by several countries till 1950. Next slide. So this is our national flag. Next slide. This is a photo of Tibetan army with the national flag. Next slide. Our currency. Next slide. Coin. Next slide. So in 1950, China started invasion of Tibet and took complete control of Tibet in 1959, which forced His Holiness the Dalai Lama and 80,000 Tibetans into exile. And His Holiness crossed over India on 31st March 1959. And after arriving in India, he established Tibetan government in exile, which is also known as Central Tibetan Administration. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, this is His Holiness coming into exile. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. So can you go back one back? Yeah. So after coming into exile, His Holiness established schools, monastery, and settlement in India, Nepal, and Bhutan, so that Tibetan identity, culture, and heritage is preserved in exile, which is right now not possible inside Tibet. As a part of this, the exile government established a Tibet Museum in 1998 with the purpose to document, preserve, research, exhibit, and educate Tibetans and non-Tibetans on all matters related to Tibet history and culture, as well as to memorialize Tibetans who have lost their lives due to the China occupation. Next slide. This is our museum inside. Next slide. So in 2008, the president of Central Tibetan Administration, Dr. Lobsang Sangye, announced the creation of new Tibet Museum in Kanjeng-Kishung, Dharamsala, which is the heart of the Tibetan exile government. The expectation placed on this museum are great. Not only it must tell the story of long history of Tibet and the much shorter and traumatic story of exile, but it also has to act as a center of truth for by taking a non-neutral stance in its representation and interpretation of Tibet's political past and present. And the most difficult task is that we actually plan to build this museum as an object-based museum, but we don't have any object in our collection. So next slide. So we don't have an object because our current museum is only based in a photographic museum, but new museum we plan to make it object based. But in order to collect this object, we reach out to Tibetan community in exile by requesting object donation to individual donors, as well as by reaching out to community. Next slide. So here I'm going to discuss about how we collected the object in exile. Next slide. So the collection of object, we actually reach out to individual donor as well as the community, but it's very difficult and not an easy task to actually do all this, because when China actually invaded Tibet, many of the objects and cultural heritage were destroyed and sent to Chinese museum, or some were sold to the international art dealer, particularly during the democratic reform and 10-year-long cultural revolution in Tibet. So when a few Tibetans who managed to escape into exile, actually they carried a very little with them. Most of those actually carried only some like manuscripts and some like edible things which they have to manage while coming into exile. So and the very small thing that they actually carry with them, they were also sold out during their initial day in exile in order to survive their family. So however, like through this community reach out, we managed to collect a good number of objects in these last 2 years, and we started building this object-based new museum. And right now we are very much looking forward to open the new museum in early 2021. And today we are very proud to tell others that all our collection which we have in our museum are like 99% being donated by the Tibetan populace in exile. Next slide. So this is like how we reach out to community exile, how we collected our Tibetan, the object, Tibetan cultural heritage object in exile. So next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So the method we applied for while collecting these objects is by contacting the individual donor. We thought of like a prospective donor who we, through our research, found out they must be possessing some very important historical object with them. So we contacted the individual donor. As well as we make a community outreach by making an official announcement through our Tibetan office, settlement office. Currently, we have like 57 Tibetan settlement office in India, Nepal, and Bhutan. And we also made this announcement through official media outlet like Tibet.net, Tibet TV, VOA, RFA. Then we, as you saw in our last some photographs, that we toured we make an object collection tour in India and Nepal, and we actually covered more than 30 different settlements in last 2 years to make this object collection. Next slide. Next slide. So when we do this object collection, we actually did two different kind of documentation. One is video documentation, so where we take record the personal testimony of the people who is donating this object, and other is written documentation. Actually, we we first ask for the video documentation, but some people are not very comfortable in front of camera. So for that, we do a written documentation. Next slide. Can you play this one? This is a one short movie of how we did this object collection, this documentation. Yeah, video documentation.
Pala thonggen de thone de kede bula da dulo chama chatang lo ani military la ne 쿠레다는 미기데 컬러 테나가지 하고 마서 직딩이난 졸라 페라 사튼도 배 사페네 주 갑라 쿠리네 마 밀레니 갑라 쿠르주로 와신 타르기 마르와 아니 컨서데 뱅잉 버로 차데도 빨라기 넬라다디 감디 쪼레샤 하 아니 데 감디기 직도알로 꼬아로지 온디지 푸티네 자라레 랑도 라자라 감디 나라라 망쳐 쿠당 베장이 쟁유루요로알라 tene pesa te khande ina de nyingma re ga nyingma ila te khare pesa khare nange sindi mela to chi je pa ji ye iu ye na bola sei chi jo che on de la ta pala di gi de mirang lo ta gengo chati mila yar sha to an tini chu lo gen ramaso sule ya themba mi do.
Thank you. Yeah. Next slide. So when we go for this object collection tool, it's very important to gain the trust of the donors. So for that, we give like a brief description about the museum project, as well as we make them to sign a consent letter that they are donating this object to the Tibet Museum. And also we provide with them this donation receipt for each object which they donated to us. Next slide. So this is the physical cataloging, which when we this object reached the Tibet Museum, we did do this all the physical cataloging with all this leaflet number, so that in future it doesn't, the object is not misplaced or lost, or is not fall to some other people's hand. And next slide. So we also do this digital cataloging. Next slide. This details of the object is we make when the object is we decided to showcase in our museum. So with each details of the object we make for the individual object. Yeah. Next slide. So once this object is cataloged, and we are after the curator and museum team decide that this object should go to the new Tibet Museum, we start the conservation and preservation work of the this object. So here, can you show the slide? Yeah, some pictures of the how we did this conservation. We established a laboratory, conservation lab in our museum. Next slide. Yeah. So this is the conservation team currently working at our new Tibet Museum. Yeah. Next slide. So we, when they do the conservation, they also do this documentation. They have a handwritten documentation, photographic documentation. They document their particular objects before the conservation, so during the conservation, after the conservation. Then also they digitize all those documentations. Next slide. So this is an example of one written and graphic documentation. So this is we digitize and save in our computer. Next slide. We also do like a technical documentation and the microscopic documentation of some objects, particularly the textile, where there's like different kind of thread, and the sewings are done. Particularly inside Tibet, most of the sewing are done by the hand. Yeah. Next slide. So when we do, particularly for the textiles, before conservation, we do a 24 hours freezing, so that all these bacteria and virus are killed during this freezing. Yeah. So this is some example of mechanical cleaning. Yeah. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. So these are some examples of how we do this conservation and preservation in our laboratory. Yeah. Next slide. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Prabal. It's not Prabal, Tashi, sorry. I just saw Prabal entering the room. So thank you, Tashi. You were also great with the time. So thank you very much. I also want to thank to the four of you for your presentations and for bringing your work experiences and context closer to us. I think today's panel, it's an example of the importance of belonging to a network where we can share and learn together. So thank you very much for your presentations. We are running behind with time, but I want to make sure that we address the questions that were coming from our participants throughout the panel. So I'm going to go in order, okay? Ines, we had 2 questions coming from Simon. Is the project financed by local or national governments or external international donors? That was one question. And another question coming from the same participant, Simon, was there any resistance against the memorial from within the community?
Bueno, el financiamiento que nosotros tenemos es...
Espera un momento. Please make sure to use the interpretation button icon, okay? Okay, Inés.
Bueno, el financiamiento que nosotros tenemos es un financiamiento del gobierno nacional a través de una institución que se llama Servicio Nacional del Patrimonio Cultural, que está adscrito al Ministerio de las Culturas, las Artes y el Patrimonio de Chile. Y respecto a la resistencia, bueno, la verdad es que no la hemos visto como materializada en el sentido de que hay alguna vulneración del espacio, pero sí, obviamente hay opiniones bastante distantes del trabajo que se hace en el memorial, ya que la comunidad tradicionalmente, vista como desde un punto de vista de las votaciones, no han tenido una simpatía histórica con las temáticas que nosotros trabajamos o unas posturas que quizás, posturas políticas que sean como más cercanas. Entonces, hay una resistencia que para nosotros no ha afectado el espacio, no se ha traducido en afectar el espacio.
Ok. ¿Y las 2 preguntas?
Sí, las 2 preguntas te las respondí.
Perfecto, perfecto, perdona. There was also a question coming from Jasmine Almacen. She wanted to understand more about the electronic host. She was talking in specific about the electronic photo exhibition. She was saying that the situation in Syria is still going on, and we, as an association of victims, want to commemorate the memory that we have loved since now.
Bueno, nosotros, los documentos que poseen las familias dan cuenta de un proceso que igual han pasado algunos años de haberse vivido. Son documentos, como les comentaba, que están relacionados con el proceso de búsqueda de toda la movilización que se realizó por verdad y justicia, que aunque seguimos esperando una justicia acorde a lo que sucedió, esas grandes movilizaciones que se dieron, que coincidieron además con este proceso de construcción del espacio, fue hace algunos años. Entonces son documentos que ya las familias tienen en su poder. Nosotros en ese cuadernillo que les comentaba que tenemos y que está en una versión digital y está habilitado en la página web de nosotros, tiene allí como una propuesta educativa de cómo podemos construirlo. Nosotros validamos esa experiencia educativa aplicándolo en talleres y dio como resultado generar una línea de tiempo con insumos que nosotros además proveímos del archivo, crear una línea de tiempo de cómo fue ese proceso de lucha que realizaron los familiares. Entonces también es una experiencia que se podría replicar en la organización en la que ella está, a ver si se ajusta esa experiencia o esa propuesta educativa de cómo se puede construir ese archivo y de cuál podría ser esa experiencia. Más allá de ese documento que nosotros tenemos, hay otras experiencias, al menos yo conozco de Latinoamérica, de crear esos archivos como comunitarios, con esa perspectiva comunitaria, de que sea mucho más colaborativa. Por ejemplo, sé que hay muchas otras, pero hay unas experiencias súper valiosas en Colombia, por ejemplo, en ese sentido. Entonces hay instancias donde ella o él podrían aprovechar de ajustar, de conocer y de poder quizás replicar en su comunidad, en su territorio.
Gracias, Inés. A new set of questions going for Gulam. Gulam, Simon ask, is there any psychosocial assistance for the victims during the process?
Yeah, we do have counselors, psychosocial counselor embedded within that project, and they engage with the victims and their family members as and when there is a need, and they also provide support if there are like cases developing which can affect those people who participate in the project in longer term.
Thank you. There was a question coming from Luth. The pictures show groups of women and men working separately. Are there spaces for exchange among them as it relates to the construction of shared memories?
Yeah. Men, it depends on in certain areas where we have more conservative communities. So usually, so men and women work separately, but in more liberal urban environments where there's not a strict separation observed with men and women, so they work together. But after memory boxes are constructed, and then when there are like many memory box exhibitions, men and women often hold programs together. When they engage with the media, with the civil society, or with the members of the public, they come together and assemble together in a single conference room or talking space.
Thank you. There was the question from Faisal. He mentioned, as you know, Gulan, because I know you responded to him, there were 3 outcomes that you mentioned from the memory box. One was the narrative, the second one was the memory box, and the third one was the victim-centered peace building networks. And Faisal was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about this third outcome.
Mm-hmm. So the third outcome is basically after we sort of try to empower the victims so that they should be able to engage with their broader local communities, like government, civil society, and then so there was a great interest in terms of engagement on the part of victims, with focus on justice and accountability issues. So that's when we thought there is a need for creating institutions in order to provide institutional framework for their work, so that their work should be more structured and more sustainable. So that's when we created this peace victim-centered peace networks. So we have got many of them in the local communities, like 7 and 8, and then there is a national victim-centered peace network, where the representatives come together to the capital whenever there is an important event, or whenever they are going to engage with the government in senior level, or with the diplomatic actors, or with the peace actors. But prior to that, we had to provide them with extensive training on international humanitarian law, on modalities of victims' participation in peace-building processes, and on communication and advocacy activities. So right now we have got like almost 200 victims who are organized within like 7 and 8 peace-building victim-centered peace-building networks, and they directly engage with the peace negotiators. We have got a peace process ongoing at the moment, and tomorrow we have got one of the most important events organized by the victims themselves, called National Victims Convention. So where they deliver their key messages and key demands to the Afghan government and the insurgent groups, as well as people who are engaged in peace process, in terms of so what they envision for justice and accountability framework.
Thank you, Gulam. I won't be able to take, I know everyone is asking a lot of questions now, but we won't be able to take all of them. So Kun asked Ghulam, how do you engage youth in transitional justice or memorialization efforts in Afghanistan? And another one coming to you, Ghulam, was from James. What was the mechanism that was used to build the trust and confidence for victims and survivors to come together and share their memories?
With regards to engaging the youths, we hold special events for different groups and categories of the people. Our focus is more on school students and university students, because they have got greater interest in terms of learning about past, about legacy of war, memories of war victims, and we, to that we also add peace education components. So we regularly hold those events. In addition to that, the memory center is open to public. Usually people from different social groupings come and visit, but youths have a greater turnout and participation at the center. And sorry, I forgot what was the other question. I kind of lost it.
It was about to build trust from victim groups.
Yeah, for building trust, I think that's very difficult. So Afghanistan is has a very divided society. It was quite difficult to bring victims together, and in many cases, some victims are perceived as perpetrators by certain other communities. So what we tried, the mechanism that we developed was to ensure equal regional representation in a group, so that certain groups should not feel that this is a project or a process that specifically targets us. And then that was basically helping us fend that division and schism. But in terms of building of trust, we mainly relied on gaming, on different games, as well as on theater, in particular interactive theater and community-based theater. They were very helpful in terms of helping people naturally get closer, increase their networking and connection, and feel easy and comfortable talking and engaging with one another. Had we not used those subtle mechanisms, I think it would have been quite difficult for us to convince and create trust among them by doing some more technical training. So we were really giving them time to engage with each other, trying them to do drawing, to tell stories, to play games, and then to perform theaters and etc. So this incremental process of engagement among them was very helpful in terms of creating and fostering trust.
Thank you, Ghulam. I'm gonna move. I know there is another question for Ghulam, but we have to move on. So the chat box is there. We can continue and we can share the email addresses to follow up with each of the participants if there are any questions. And we can use the chat box as well, okay, to answer any remaining questions. Sabine, two questions coming your way. One is if you could please share some challenges to make the project happen. Maybe that's a little bit of more of an extensive question, but there. What about outreach? How did you outreach those who have no access to internet in the communities? Sorry, and the third one is, would you telling more about the project, how the project works with psychologists and therapists?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to be very brief. Thank you all for your messages. For the challenges, I'll name the biggest one, and it was to build trust in the communities and to have them, because it's not easy for them to share their stories. It's not easy to go back to those very difficult memories of the war and share them. And some of the families didn't really, hadn't really spoken about the issues even with their families. It was very hard for them to express it. So that was the biggest challenge, really taking time to break this ice and feel that they can trust us enough, especially that many of the interviews were done by trained young people. So it was about training them well so they can inspire trust with the families. About the outreach, yes, we did for Fushat Aman, we did more of an offline outreach for empty chairs waiting families. Hopefully, if we are not in confinement anymore at some point, we will. But for Fushat Amal, we placed the cubes I showed in the presentation in different parts of the streets in Beirut, and some inside the restaurants or in enclosed areas for a while, depending on where they were. And these cubes show pictures of the missing person and the stories that were told by their families. And also in printed media, we printed stories for a year and a half, every week, in 3 different printed newspapers in Lebanon. And for how the sessions go, it's a process, it's a long process of sessions. First, the groups are divided into regional groups, so to make it more accessible for the families. And it starts with information sessions where we welcome the families and make sure that they want to join the rest of the sessions that have psychosocial support and art therapy sessions. We explain the process and make sure that they would like to join. And then there are 3 different psychosocial sessions that discuss many things as a group with the families, including the difference of the impact between the impact on the families between someone in the family missing or having disappeared and death, and the meaning of missing and how it can affect the different family members, including economically. So this is done through different games. The right to know is explained, and we go on before the start of the art therapy session and to explaining how we can celebrate the life of the loved ones through art. And then the chairs were painted through different, so 3 art therapy sessions, so they can take their times and really figure out how they want to express their memories of their loved ones through art.
Thank you, Sabine. And Tashi, one question coming your way from Simone. Did you try to get stolen objects back? For example, those that were sold to international museums? You muted.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. So not really. We couldn't manage to do that because right now we are in India. So we are in exile government. So we have to follow all those rules and regulations of India. And like in case if we ask for the reparation of this object from the various museum and the international art dealers, we are not very sure whether this will go directly to the hand of the China or to us, because right now the China claimed that Tibet as a part of the country, and any object which is actually sold or stolen from Tibet, maybe China will claim on that object also. So we haven't tried for that.
Thank you, Tashi. Okay, so with this, we are closing the panel. Thank you very much. I will ask our panelists if you could please share your email addresses in the chat box for any, there were some pending questions. I apologize, I know the time is never long enough. So please share your email addresses and then the conversation keep going. Apologies for the delay, apologies to our translators that I know they need to take a break. We will be back in 15 minutes. Please take 2 minutes to fill out the poll. Like I said at the beginning, it's incredibly important. After the break, we will follow up with the second session of the training on community-led documentation in transitional justice processes. And during the break, we're gonna do a showing of Memory, Truth, and Justice Media Project from Women and Voices of Women Media. Okay, so thank you very much, and I will see you in 15 minutes.